Well, and we want to take in consideration the quality of other people's stuff too. And I feel like that's a big part of what I bring is that I have energy and I get really excited about what I'm talking about. And I don't know that I can bring that right now because I feel very low energy. I think I could talk about it, but I don't know if it would be the same as if I showed up feeling like I'm here. Does that make sense?
It does, but I actually kind of see that as like the authentic side of self, right? Because I think this is, to me, is the issue with YouTube and social media, is that everybody only ever shows up when they're their best selves.
Right,
They
right.
never show up when
Well, let's
they're
flow with it. Like
shit.
now we're on it,
And
right? Now we're on it. So let's flow with it. I'm good. And we'll just let people know. And the thing, hey, I'm sick and this is me showing up authentically. Let's just go with it.
exactly, exactly. And I feel like we're already underway.
Right.
Because it's so easy to show up as that perfect, beautiful, ideal self when we're filled with bubbly energy and we're filled with happiness and joy. But to show up when you're not that, it can sometimes be challenging because it challenges those parts of you that think we have to be we have to be perfect. We
Right.
have to be this. We have to be this mask. And the
Right.
mask it's exhausting.
Well, this is really interesting that you brought this up because this has been a big part of my life, this identity part. So when
Mm.
I was young, I don't know if you want me to introduce myself, if that's better for me to go in that way, but there's a
No,
big
we're
part.
already going. My
All right.
podcast, my
Yeah.
show
Let's
doesn't
do
actually
it.
have a start.
Okay.
It just
Goes.
starts. It just goes. We're underway.
I like it. I like it when people let things just be easy. But, when I was a young child, I was raised very strict, religious, like culty almost. And so there was a lot of things about me that were really suppressed. And, my mom wasn't in the religion, my grandparents were, but she always did a good job of, she never like shamed me, but she definitely would be like curbing me. She'd be like, don't say that or don't do that. It might make people feel weird around you because I'm extremely intuitive. I would say things like, I would just, and one of those things I think, I mean, I don't know how far you go into the woo-woo esoteric world, but I think there's a lot of past life stuff here. But when I was very, very young, I was very advanced for my age. And I remember pondering this idea of who am I? Like, what part of me is this and what part of me is learned? And that kind of set the path for what I do now. I do manifestation with neuroscience and it's heavy on, the business side of things. But the secret is that's how we heal. I do money work because it's one of the most healing things I could ever do for anyone. But anyways, back to that, this neuroscience of who am I, right? Like there's this identity that we have all created that we will say, oh, that's just how we are. That's our personality. And it's not, it's learned. And that was a hard pill to swallow. I only figured that out about 3 years ago after wondering this for years, because I was always praised as that person that had a personality. Like I get what I want because of my personality. Like, oh, it's easy for you to get jobs or make friends or boyfriends because of your personality. And I always wondered, is that me? And so about 3 years ago, I would say I was in like the dark night of the soul, like in the depths of the trenches, going through it all. And it came to me, and I had a lot of resentment for a little bit of my mom growing up in Tennessee. It's a very debutante style lifestyle of like women are groomed to be a certain way. And I was always groomed to be bright, bubbly, like, and yes, I do think if I look at my family is pretty outgoing, but again, how much of that is nature versus nurture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I went through this really deep, like swing the other way of like, F you, like I'm gonna be how I want, and like just swung the totally opposite way. And now I'm finding my way back to middle around what brings me joy and how I want to show up in that way. And I think I am naturally a bubbly human, but without all the people pleasing, without all the, oh, I should say yes because I should, or you're allowed to cross that boundary because that's polite, right?
Mm, mm,
Some
mm.
deep inquiry there for many, many years for me. So I love how that's how this started off. Like we just went in deep. We're like, here we go.
It's interesting because I understood that well, we are learned human beings. Everything that we have, every belief that we have, every pattern that we have, every way we are in life is learned. And I learned that, oh, it must have been about 15 years ago. And when I got that, it's like, crap, then who am I? If my beliefs aren't my own, because every belief I have either came from my mum, my dad, school teachers, grandparents, TV, like everything around me has made me me, then who am I in all of that? And I started asking this question. I took the pill 17 years ago and then really opened the door. And then it was about 15 years ago, I started to get deeper and deeper. And I'm 15 years later and I'm still going, who am I?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know who I am in all of this shit because there's so much of it. And my learned behavior, where your learned behavior was to be outgoing and bubbly, my learned behavior was to be punished for being outgoing and bubbly. So my loudness was punished. My happiness was punished. My joy was punished. My fun was punished. All of those parts that you would want to be in life as punished. So I have had to learn how to stifle all of that. I've had to shut down my happy, shut down my fun, shut down my joy, shut down my passion, shut down my pleasure, because I was always like you. I was always getting the friends, getting the boyfriends, getting all of this stuff. But then I had a sibling who was completely opposite, looked completely opposite to me. And there was so much jealousy in that I got punished for being who I was because she was upset about it. And it would, like, she didn't like it. So my parents basically took her side and said, well, you essentially need to stop being who you are. And I was young. I was like 9 and 10 when this kind of started. And then 11 and 12 was when it really kicked in, was when I really started to go, okay, for me to be accepted in this world, I can't be me. Well, and it takes a lot to unravel all of that bullshit.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you cuss? I cuss. So I was going to ask you because
I am a sailor.
I'll be mindful.
All the time. It's fine.
Okay, it's very much a part of my brand as well. I say brand as like, but I mean like I cuss like in my business, I guess is what I say, because I believe spirituality. I'm very spiritual, but my brand is not spiritual facing. But it's manifesting in neuroscience. So I'm like, it's woo-woo esoteric, bridging the gap between science and woo-woo esoteric. But anyways, I teach my clients, I tell them all the time, I said, you're unraveling many, many, many years of patterning. But the way I understand it from science, I don't know if this helps, but it's like epigenetics versus DNA, right? So if DNA is your hardware, epigenetics that you're passed through your parents is your software. It can be upgraded, it can be changed, unlike your DNA, right? And based on your environment will determine how those genes upregulate or downregulate. So I don't know that nothing is completely us. I don't know if that's true. I think there are intelligence in our DNA that we get passed down, that maybe even belief systems that were from generations ago that we're not even aware of on a genetic imprinted level, right? Mm-hmm. But I think there is a part of us that I call it like the essence, for lack of a better term. And when I do alignment work, this is what we're talking about, because you do have a truth of what's in alignment for you and who you are. But I don't know if the work is ever done. I feel like I'm 36 years old. I've been on this path for a very long time. Like I said, I was in deep inquiry about this as a young child. I would meditate hours on end when I was young. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time. I remember coming home from church and them explaining to me, well, if you go to hell, hell is forever. Like I went to one of those like brimstone, like fire, everyone's going to hell churches, like literally had to go to therapy after that because I had like post-traumatic stress over it. And I remember just sitting in my room and contemplating the idea of forever. Like my little brain just couldn't wrap my head around it. And I would do it for hours on end. And I would get to this feeling. I remember the feeling of like, I almost am grasping it. And my mom, love her heart, I'm from Tennessee. Like, my mom's never seen anything like this. And she's like, who is this child? And then I got older and I realized I was meditating. That's what I was doing. I didn't know that at the time. But I think in this part of my life, I feel like there is finally a coming back home. I have spent probably about 15 years. I left the US when I was 19. I've been traveling ever since. I've studied with monks and plant medicine practitioners in the Amazon, and studied neuroscience and studied, I had this insatiable quest for knowledge for this reason. I wanted to know why. I wanted to understand who I was. I wanted to understand these things. And it was like I was pulling back the layers, and I finally feel like I'm coming home. But the coming home part is also a journey. I don't know that it ever ends.
I don't know. I hope it does. I hope that there comes a point. I hope there comes a point in my life where I am not working on my stuff anymore. I really hope there comes a point where I get to this moment in life and I go, I'm done. That's it. Now I can just be, I can be connected, and I can just flow through life, and I'm done. All my stuff, all my trauma, all my stories, all my patterns, it's all been processed. It's all been categorized. If we want to go into the control part, it's all been categorized. It's all been filed properly. Every single piece of paper that was at some point just thrown up in the air of my brain, everything has found its way back into its right file, and everything is just there. And now I can exist as a human being. I hope that there is a moment where I have that experience and go, great, I'm done. Now I can live.
Well, I will share my experience, and because I never want to project mine onto other people, but for me, and this was recent, like, I'm a trauma survivor. I've went through severe trauma. I've had a lot of trauma to unpack, which is hence why I went on this journey, why I do what I do now. And I had psychiatrist after psychiatrist basically be like, I don't even know how you're sane. You had such an insane amount of trauma in such a short amount of time that, like, your brain shouldn't even be functioning normally, like, trauma survivor. And for me, I always had people there doing healing work with me. I'm very particular about the type of people and about the type of healing work I do. And I'm really lucky. I have this amazing girl in one of my communities, and I decided to mentor her because I trusted her, and no one that I found works the way I do. And I said, I will teach her to work the way I do so she can hold space for me the way I do. And it's been such a transformational journey for both of us. But what came up is I was so deep in the healing. And I don't know, this happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. It just, something clicked. Like, I had this big breakthrough. I was like, it was pretty intense. I had some really intense things come up, and I said, this is the evolution. This is the next part. I said, the healing work will always be there, but it's no longer in the forefront. I'm now just being and embodying. And when things get shaky, well, yeah, I have to do the healing work. I have to do the work on myself, but it's no longer the priority. It's no longer me sitting in it and dissecting every little thing. It's like, oh, now I just get to be. So that's how it was for me. I'm sure it'll keep evolving. But that was an interesting observation because I didn't know that before. I kind of just thought, well, this is how it's going to be forever. I'm a trauma survivor, and I'm always going to have to do this deep healing work.
No, it's interesting that you say that, actually, because I was listening to what you were saying and I thought that I actually really get, because for a long time I was doing that really deep work on the past, like the constant work on the past. The past was just always rattling around in my brain, and I could be somewhere and all of a sudden I'll have this thought and I'll have this massive emotional flashback, and it would have nothing to do with what's in front of me, completely relates to something in my past. And it was all the time. But it's really interesting that now, from what you've just said, it's kind of shifted my perspective around a few things, because I'm like, I get that, because now I'm not working on that constant survival, just fear, panic, trauma brain. Now I'm okay until something happens. I'm okay until something happens. But if something happens, it's no longer there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's an in the moment thing. And then I deal with that thing in the moment.
You come
And
back quick, catch it and come back quicker instead of it being like for like a week. Yeah.
Yes, because sometimes I've just had something happen in the last couple of weeks here with someone that was staying here. And usually that would just rattle in my brain a lot, like a lot. And it still comes up every now and then. It even came up this morning, actually. I had the thought come up about what I was going to do. Was I going to text them? But it was a 5-minute thought. And then I just stopped and I said, oh, hang on a minute. Let's just move into a space of compassion for someone who is obviously going through something that is really extremely traumatic for them and is really scary for them and is really hard for them. And do I really need that money back? Do I really need to go down that path? Do I really need to keep rehashing this? No. Okay, let's move into a space of compassion and bring ourselves back. But that happens so much faster. Whereas that constant thought could have been rattling around in my brain for an entire day, and I'd go to sleep with it in my head, and then I'd wake up with it in my head, and then it'd go for a whole day again. So that has been a massive, massive change, is how quickly you come back.
Yeah, it's magical when you're like, when you're observing that moment, when you're like, I'm doing it, I'm being the person, this is what I've worked for. Like, yeah, I'm not be perfect, but like, I'm here. And that's a magical place to be, of like, I'm no longer triggered. I tell people all the time, I'm like, nothing is personal, even if it's personal. Even if it is personal, it's still not personal. And as soon as we can get, like, the reason I do neuroscience is it's how your brain and body communicate. It's your nervous system. But I don't use nervous system work or nervous system regulation because the way that they're talking about it on the internet is very different than how I do it. So I use a different terminology for that reason. But once your nervous system like the way that your brain is wired for safety. So it's just going off like the lens of which it knows, right? And so your nervous system is responding to that, and it's this cycle. And then you're like, once you started doing this work and you realize like my story around that, like when you realize your stories, I have a story, had-ish, like it's still there a little bit, but not nearly as much, as like people taking advantage of me. I had this huge story, and every woman in my family has this story too. So I had to really get curious. I was like, where did this come from? And something like that, where somebody owed me money and didn't pay me, like that would have just spun me out. And now I'm just kind of like, because it's not the money, it's the story that came with it. It was the, oh, you're taking advantage of me. I'm not worthy of you to even be, to honor your word to me. That's really what that was, right? And I think when I was able to ground into that, and then ironically, things would work themselves out, like stuff that I used to get so worked up over. And then once I started doing this work and just being like, it'll work itself out, like maybe that person didn't pay me back, but something came out of nowhere else, somewhere else. And I was like, oh, like we are really creating our reality here, like not just from a neuroscience perspective, because I do believe, like, you know, our thoughts create things, and I can explain that from a scientific way, but I believe the universe meets us there. When we change the universe and change how we perceive the world, the universe meets us there, right? So that's kind of the way I look at it. And now when I notice myself getting triggered, I'm just like, oh, okay. Like my cute little brain is freaking out, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And it allows me to calm down because I'm not being mean to me. I'm just saying, oh, it's a cute little brain, and it takes the pressure off, because it is. It's our brain in our safety mechanism being like, oh, hey, remember that one time when this thing happened and it made you feel like that? Don't go there. Don't allow that to happen. That's really bad. And then your body's like, oh yeah, that was really bad. Don't do that. And it like cycles. And then now I'm just like, okay. And then my brain will freak out for a minute, and I'll even say out loud, you cute little brain, are you sure that this is? And then it'll calm down.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
I do want to ask you about, so I find, similar to you, it's actually quite easy to not identify with my thoughts, but it's so much more challenging not to identify with my feelings. But I want to share something really quickly around the money story that you had, because like yours was people paying you back. This one was, I actually gave her money because, in her words, I am a nice person. But what I realized was there's that part of me that gives because I want the person to like me. and I want the person to think I'm a good person, and I want the person to want to spend time with me. So I will give people things like the person next door. Don't even ask me why, but I offered the lawnmower. We had a spare lawnmower here. And so I offered him the lawnmower. I said, you can take it. You can, you can borrow it, get it fixed, whatever you want. He has kind of taken that as he now owns it, spent $700 on getting it fixed. So now I feel like I can't take it back because he's just spent $700 on getting it fixed. But it is this part inside of me that goes, what can I give you because I really want you to like me? And that can be stuff, or it can be money. I had a really beautiful organic woolen underlay. It's like a doona that sits underneath your sheets that makes the bed much softer. I had one of those. And a friend of mine was complaining one day about how hard their mattress was. So I gave her my underlay and she went and got it cleaned, and then she's using that. And it's like just story after story after story I have where I have given. And it's something that I'm looking at now, is looking at unraveling, because that also ties into my money story of receiving money. Because receiving money for me it's not hard, but it is hard. It came really easily from my mom, but my bank of mum has shut down because she's passed away. So my bank of mum no longer exists. So now it's, well, shit, now I've got to receive money. So because you do money story stuff, I'd love to unpack that with you, but I do want to talk about the feelings, because it is really hard
to separate out from that.
To separate from the feelings, because the thoughts it's just a voice in your head. There's like 500 voices in your head and they're going off their cracker all day, every day. So easy to go, yeah, whatever. But the feelings, oh, that's different. Did you find that harder to?
Yeah. So knowing, studying neuroscience, this is why I study, because people are like mindset and this and that. And guys, like, if you're listening to this, like mindset is amazing. I do brain and body connection and mindset, and those are different things. And the reason I say that is because mindset is, you can sit on the couch and say, I'm losing weight. I weigh 150 pounds or whatever. And you're eating potato chips and your body is going to be like, bullshit. So your mindset is not always it, especially if it's like, people will say, fake it till you make it, the mantras, all of that. But if your body doesn't feel it's true, you will actually sabotage it. That's why the brain body connection is super important. And I am such a feeling person. And when I say feeling, I mean sensations. So here's what happens. There's a little bit of controversy in the neuroscience community around which ones come first, the thoughts or the feelings, but it honestly doesn't matter because it's a loop. And I think
it's both. I think you can have your thought, which will create the feeling, and you can have the feeling, which will create the thought. I don't think it's one or the other. I think that's a very black and white.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about people in a clinic, like a clinical place, trying to actually pinpoint what's going on in the brain, right?
Yes.
But yes, the general consensus of our experiences is both. And we call it top down, bottom up, right? Top down meaning it starts from here, or bottom up meaning it starts from a feeling or sensation, right? So for this conversation, I'm going to very oversimplify. So if anybody has a background in neuroscience, don't
don't judge.
Because I simplify it for a reason. And so let's say for this conversation, something happens, you have a thought, that thought creates a sensation. Okay, then your body, your brain, depending on your body, where your nervous system is at, and your nervous system has a lot to do with your prior lens, right? Of like what you've seen the world, what you've experienced, what's good and bad, will then dictate the emotion, the feeling, right? So when people say feelings, it gets a little like, is it a sensation or is it an emotion? Because they're different, right? Mm-hmm. And if you've ever notice, like when you're really excited, but you're also like kind of scared or nervous, you're like, I don't know what I am. That is hyperregulation. It's almost identical, like fear and excitement can be almost identical in the body. Okay. And so that's why when people talk about manifesting from excitement and like celebrating and la la la, and I'm like, that's no, we want what we want to manifest to feel like the most natural and normal thing in our body, because not only are we telling our body it's natural and normal and that's how we hold it, but it's also telling the universe it's natural and normal. If somebody pays you for your service and you're like, oh my God, someone paid me, it's like, that's not natural and normal for you. That means that that's not going to come in more for you. Like, yes, have gratitude for it, celebrate yourself as a human, but don't make your body feel overly excited about something that should feel very natural and normal, right? And so for me, that's why I dove into this. I was like, I need to understand this thoughts, feeling, emotion cycle, because people talk a lot about the thoughts, but they don't talk about the sensations and feelings. So the tools that I use, if you are a feelings person, now I have some people that are like, I don't have sensations, and that's not medically possible. What's happened is like you, not you, the collective you has maybe had a lot of things happen with big sensations and you've learned to numb them out. Because people sometimes be like, oh, I don't feel anything. And I'm like, it's not possible. Like, it's literally not possible, right? But when you do, when you're like me and you have a very overly sensational body, like I process a lot in my stomach, like anything, like excitement, but also like if something bad goes happen, I get that like sinking feeling in my stomach. And then my brain's like, oh, here we go again. And then I go into like an anxiety cycle. So the first thing is that we just want to be aware of it. We want to be like, what's the sensation, not the emotion, right? Where is it in my body? What's going on? What color is it? Giving sensations a color in your body helps bypass the conscious brain, because your conscious brain is there for protection. So your conscious brain is actually trying to keep you in that feeling, because the feeling is actually a protection mechanism. It's like, hey, something's wrong. A boundary's been crossed or something's wrong. And so we give it a color, because your brain will then not see it as a direct like inquiry on what's going on. So it's like, where is this? What color is it? How do you notice it? Is it clear? Is it like see-through? Where is it in your body? And then I ask people a lot, I say, when's the first time you remember feeling this feeling? And it will take you back to where that neural pathway was created. That's a neural pathway. Your neural pathway is when a thought is associated with a feeling. And anytime that something happens that triggers that, the story about the thought, it creates that feeling, right? So we get to rewire a new feeling into it. So first of all, knowing where it came from and why it's there, right? The second thing is doing something like tapping, like EFT tapping. I don't know how familiar you are with that. That's one of my favorite things, and I'm happy to gift you my course. I think it's like $25. It's like a 30-minute course. Gift you that and your audience that for free. You can just have a coupon to download it for free, and you can use it for anything. It's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and sensations. So once you do that enough, your body will start to understand it's safe for me to process those sensations versus hold on to them. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Answer your question? Okay. And if you have more questions about that, please let me know. I'm happy to elaborate.
It does make sense. I actually, years ago, because I could never remember the EFT, and I understood the concept of moving the energy around. So I actually created my own tapping technique that was easy and simple. I could remember it. I actually got to a point where I programmed my consciousness that I could do it in my mind. So I prefer to do it physically myself. But if I'm out somewhere and I don't want to look like a weirdo because I'm tapping myself, I would just do it in my head, and it would create exactly the same response of shifting the energy.
The reason, so this is so interesting. My tapping is not like anything. Mine's also super simple for that reason, because people can't remember it. Like, I just do these points to tap out the bad. Like, I'm feeling this, I'm thinking this, whatever. And then there's a spot right here to install the good. That's it. It's only like a 3-minute thing. It's not the whole thing where, because that is like the EFT
it's intense.
Overwhelming, right? Like it is. And so I also have, I learned mine from Mike Mandel. He is a world-class hypnotist. He is not woo-woo or esoteric. He was actually a consul, I believe. Oh, I can never remember if it's the FBI or the CIA. I think it's the CIA equivalent to Canada. And he went and consulted and advised on how to interrogate people without implanting false memories. And so he is not a woo esoteric guy. He's very like, and so I learned this from him, and I've even refined it further. So I love that you created your own, because that's how I roll. I'm like, no, I'm never going to do that. That's not viable. I'm going to create my own. So this one that I'm giving you is a very short version if you wanted to try it. But the reason it works is we call it an anchor. So for example, like, you know, if it's like, okay, I'm feeling anxious and I tap it out and I feel better. And at the end I go, peace. And if you do about 3 rounds of that, depending on how anxious you are, and if you're having a panic attack, it's a different situation, but just anxious, just overly thoughtful, eventually this will become your anchor, and you don't have to tap at all. You just grab your hand and it's peace. So that's why when you think about it, that's become your anchor.
Yeah.
And anchors are so powerful, especially when we're manifesting. Like, and that's the whole point of reality creation is like, well, if what's happening, the things are creating my thoughts, that creates my perception of reality, that creates my feelings, and that dictates how I act, and that obviously my actions create my reality. We really are creating our reality. Like if we want to just leave the woo-woo esoteric part behind, we are creating our reality in that sense, right? And so, but it's based on how we feel and the feeling and thoughts cycle. But if I can ask you right now, we'll go to the happiest time in your life, and you can go there. Well, that just tells us that you can choose to feel anything anytime you want. There's just a part of you that is trying to keep you safe that doesn't. It's like, and this is a very primal thing, right? Like we are wired to be in a group of people back from caveman times, because that was safety. If you get kicked out of your group, you would die. So this is primal stuff. So if you're taught at a young age, you're too shiny, you're too much. Like, ironically, I was told like to be very, you know, but also told a lot. I've been told a lot, you're too much. You talk too much, you're too bubbly. Like I've had both, right, in the world. And if you think that you're going to get ousted, there is a primal part of you that's going to fight for it, because it thinks that your inclusivity equals survival, right? And so there's a part of us that will fight for that. And that's when we're like, oh, our cute little brain again is just trying to keep us safe. That's not true. That's just a story. And you'll notice immediately your body will start to relax, because your brain's like, oh, you hear me. You do hear my signal. You do see the sign. And you're like, yeah, I see it. That's why when we tap, we say it out loud, because you need to say out loud, like, what you're experiencing, and just that alone is usually enough to calm it down. And I have a lot of other tools I use, but tapping's just the one that it works for everybody, and it's easy. Well, my version is easy, but that's just one of them. And that basically in long term is rewiring your nervous system. So every time that something happens, it doesn't default to that same sensation and that same feeling. So if you want to talk about your money story and unravel it, I'm happy to guide you through that. If that's something you feel comfortable with, I'm happy to do that for you.
Yeah, let's I'd love to talk about the money stuff, because
Let's do it.
I think it's something that just affects everybody. And interesting enough, someone wrote a comment. I don't know if it was on a post I was looking at, or it's something that I wrote, but anyway, she commented to something I said, and her comment was, you get something like, you get to a point where money doesn't matter. And I said, that is only true for people that have money. Because when you don't have money, it matters. And she said, well, yeah, kind of. But, and I thought, no, there's no but. If you have money, you can actually be in a space where money doesn't matter. Because you have it, it doesn't matter. It's not relevant anymore.
Like we have to pay our bills, right? Like,
yeah, when you have that flow, when you have that receiving energy, and you've got it coming in and it's going out and everything is covered, it doesn't matter. Of course it doesn't matter. It just becomes another part of your life. But when you don't have it, and that receiving energy is blocked, and you've got nothing coming in, but you've got a whole bundle going out, which is really, to me, in the simplest way I can explain it for me, is if you are a constant giver and you are not very good at receiving, you are going to receive every now and then, but you are going to constantly give. And money is no different. I put money down to exactly the same pattern. that if you
Is
are a
that a
constant
holding
giver and you're
thing?
not good at receiving, you're not going to get very much money.
So can I ask you this? Is it a holding thing? Like, is it like when you do have money, it doesn't feel safe in the body? And so you're like, these people that I see that have holding is more like they spend it faster than they can make it. It doesn't feel safe in their body. Like they're just like, no, 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 I don't want this. Like, is it that? Because I hear that there's a people pleasing aspect, and we're going to dive into that. But I'm curious if it's like, I don't receive money and I'm a giver, or is it, well, I'm a giver and I don't like to hold, because those are different.
Yeah, they are. I don't spend it as quickly as it comes in. So I'm not someone that just
Like
spends constantly. At the moment, we are on a needs basis, and it's every now and then I might go, oh, I really want that. Like there's this part of me, I really, really want that. It's like, no, 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 not right now. So I'm not a spender, I think is the best way. I used to be a spender, but I'm not now. But I'm not a hoarder. I kind of have what I have, and I'm looking at it going, it's purely from a survival perspective. How long
it's
can what I
surviving
have,
that survival.
yeah, how long can what I have last? I really think the block for me is in the receiving more than the giving, because that
That's
goes with anything. It's really hard for me to receive love
anything.
and
Okay.
kindness, but it's
Okay.
also really hard for me to receive anger and hatred. And like, it's not, I'm not saying, oh, I can't just receive this energy. It's really hard for me to receive. And I think
Genuine.
that's just my that is my family thing. I was the one, and I say this a lot, or I used to say this a lot, that I cannot bend myself into a big enough pretzel to please everybody that stands in front of me. So I can have a one-on-one conversation with someone, but you put two people in front of me that I have to have a conversation with, and that's really challenging, because I don't know
How
how
to,
to receive two energies coming to me at once. I don't know how to process that. I don't know how to handle that. And I think that comes from having two parents that were very different, parented in very different ways. Because my dad left when I was a baby, and my dad was a sanctimonious asshole, basically. Sanctimonious Christian asshole. Made him even better. But my mom was an atheist victim, if we're going based on like just the complete opposites. And they both
yeah,
parented in very different ways. So with
yeah.
my mom, I had to be one way, but with my dad, I had to be another way. And I learned very quickly what that way was, so I could lessen the punishment. Not so it would go away, because it never went away, but so I could lessen it. But because there was no love coming at me, I didn't learn to open and receive. Because if you don't receive love when you're a kid, you don't want to, you don't want to receive. So you just put up walls that just bounce off all the
Yeah,
anger and the punishment and the rejection and all that stuff.
yeah, it's protection for
It's a
sure.
protection thing. So when you close yourself off, you're closing
Yeah,
yourself off to everything. It's not a, I'm just going to open myself up to love
so
when I
the
can
one
get it.
thing I'm going to say, because I want to be mindful of the time, but one thing I'm going to say is I even noticed your body language. As soon as you started talking about it, you did this, right? Like close, boundary. And so we can actually start the process of reverse engineering by changing our body language. So when you notice that this is something, somebody's complimenting you or they're talking to you, and you notice yourself wanting to do this, you can even just start by opening your body. And at the beginning, it's going to be uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie to you, because this is years and years and years of you doing this. But what I'm curious about is, when this happens, how does it feel in your body? Like the sensation. Get really curious about the sensation. Where is it? How does it feel? Describe it to me, because we can actually reverse engineer to where that neural pathway was created. and we can unravel that story now, if you're open to it. I can do it in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I come to you and I say, here is $100,000 in cash. And I want you to imagine I'm handing it to you and you're holding it in your hand. What happens? Because I hear that there's a money part to this. I know it's not only money, but let's just start there because I'm a money person and you did mention your money story. So we'll use that as an in. What happens in your body? You're actually holding it. It's in your hand. What's happening?
There is a pressure in my chest. My cough actually gets worse. Breathing goes shallow. It's harder to breathe.
And I just want you to know you're more than you're unconscious to know that it's safe to go here fully because I'm here to hold that and help you transmute it. Sometimes our unconscious will be like, oh my gosh, it's scary. So you're safe to go there if your unconscious needs to hear that. And I'm curious, like, if you can describe it the more the better. Like, it's heavy, it's light, it's see-through, it's vibrational, there's a color. The more you can describe, the better. Is it in your body? Is it outside of your body?
Most of my blocks are gray and they're not solid. They're kind of like gray clouds, but not fluffy like a cloud. Kind of like a cloud, but not a cloud. They're more dense than a cloud.
Yeah, I'm tracking. Okay. Is it in your body, outside of your body?
Oh, it's inside. It definitely sits around my chest.
Right.
If it gets too, if it shifts into fear, then like you, it drops down into my stomach. You know, that drop, that terror drop.
Yeah. I get that feeling in my stomach when I'm not even doing anything. Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah, that terror drop. It'll drop if I go too far down the rabbit hole. It'll drop into terror.
Allow that to take over too much, right? Yeah. Like outside the window of tolerance. So there's a certain amount that our body will allow us to experience before it goes into like panic mode. That's what that is.
Yes.
So
yes.
I want you to go back and just trust. Don't think about it. Just trust your body and your unconscious to take you back to the earliest and most significant time when you remember this feeling. And just trust that the right memory will come. Don't think about it too much. When's the first and most significant time that you remember feeling this?
I don't know exactly. The image that I'm getting is my mum yelling, but that happened a lot.
For whatever reason, that's what's coming forward. So that's part of the neuro pathway. It doesn't even matter if it's the right memory, to be honest with you. It's just whatever your brain thinks is the right one. So I just want you to be in that memory. Like, is it a specific, like, I know you said it's not specific, but in this time, is there a specific one that's coming up?
I can see something. I can see something around mum yelling about money.
Okay. What is it about money? I'm curious. Do you remember?
My brain keeps going to how I react to my daughter. Which my biggest triggers with her are if she wants something, but I can't get it. So then my people pleaser freaks out because I need to, and my fixer freaks out because I need to fix this. She wants that. I need to fix it. I need to please her. I want her to like me.
So what does that mean about you personally when you can't give her what she wants?
I'm a bad person.
There it is.
Yeah. I did a video for myself. I started to unravel all of this the other day around my daughter and money. And it came right down to two things. I'm a bad person. And if I don't have money, it means death.
Yeah, it's a survival thing, right?
Yeah.
But ironically, what happens is when our brain says, well, money equals survival, there will always be tenseness around it. So
But
I'm
how can
curious.
it not be survival? Because I went right down, and I didn't try and fix it or answer it, but I went down right down to the fact, well, if I don't have money, then I can't house us, I can't clothe us, and I can't feed us. If
So
I can't give her those three fundamental things, we die.
yes, I hear you, but for just a moment, just for the I just need you to put that down for just a second, because I'm going to show you the irony. The irony is that when we have fear about something, we are actually creating the thing that we have the fear around. And
Yes.
so let's just set that aside. I know it's a real belief. I understand that it's a real thing, but let's just set it aside for just a second. And I want to go back to this version of you when you were younger and your mom is yelling at you. Okay. What does that version of you need? Because I found it interesting. You said, well, I know where the block is, but I didn't do anything about it. Why? Because there is a part of you fighting to keep it because it means survival to you. So I'm kind of loving and shoving here and saying, well, let's transmute that. I hear that you don't want to transmute it because there's a part of you that's like, well, if I let this go, we might die. I hear that. So how do we get to soften it? We're not going to transmute it on this call because I didn't get to go deep enough, but like I can help you soften it. I can help you get to the point where it starts to soften, because money is energy, money does flow. And when you tense up around money, it's always going to be stagnant. It's always going to be stagnant. And this comes down to trusting not only yourself, but the universe of like, I'm safe. There's a lot of safety things that come with money,
Yeah,
right?
so much safety. Yeah.
So yeah. So if you go back to that version of yourself that came up and your mom is yelling, that young part of you, what did she need? What can we give her right now? It might be a conversation. It might be a hug. It might be a shield. It might just be like, here's a shield. She is going through her own stuff. This means nothing about you. And her reality does not have to shape yours. But we actually have data on this. We can, most of our memories aren't even real. So a lot of us are walking around angry about stuff or sad about stuff that didn't even actually happen. I know. So if we can go back and we can what we call revise the memory, it will change. And it might be a slight change at first, but if you keep doing it, it'll compound, right? So if you do this plus tapping, you'll be good. So what does that version of you need? I'm really curious because I'm sure she needs something. She probably needs a lot of love, I'm hearing.
A lot of love, but also safety, an anchor in safety. That is, I've noticed that's a big thing that impacts that fear response, is that lack of foundation, that lack of safety.
Have you ever felt safety? If I asked you to feel safe in your, okay, can you borrow?
I am creating more safety now. I am building my own foundations now, and I have moments where I'm working on allowing myself to feel safe.
Okay.
And I have stopped all my panic attacks, but the only way I could do that was to bring in safety. So my automatic response was, no, I haven't felt safety, but actually I have, because the only way I could have stopped my panic attacks was to feel safe, because they were coming from not feeling safe.
Here's what I want. I'm going a little bit fast because I want to be mindful of the time, and I'm also not feeling well. But so I want you to see if this lands for her, to give her some armor of protection that feels safe. I want you to infuse that armor with that young version of you with safety. See if that feels good for her. Does that feel like yeah, okay, that feels good? And she'll tell you, she'll be like, no, I need something else. But can we give her armor that feels safety, that kind of encapsulates her in that feeling of safety? And then I'm going to have you do some other things that help cement that good feeling in. And that's going to start the rewiring of the neural pathway. Can we do that? Does she, the question is she receiving it? Is she like, yeah, that works?
Yeah, the safety works.
Is it a shield? What does she need?
Bubble. I like the shield. I think the shield is a great.
Give her a shield. And I want you to feel as much safety as you can in your body right now. And I want you to infuse that shield with that feeling and notice what color it is. And just pretend, we're just playing pretend here. There's no wrong way to do it. Just pretend. If safety were a color for that shield, what would it be? And imagine like you're there with her, like doing this with her. You're handing it to her and you're saying, hey, and you can be honest. This is the most safe, like this is as much safety that I have, but I'm giving this to you now. And then we're going to do something else that's going to supercharge it. So don't worry if you feel like it's not enough. And if there's emotion coming up, let it come up. I don't know if there is, but just whatever's coming up is allowed to be here.
She's actually good. The shield helps because it's kind of like the superhero comics with the shield when they hold it up and the thing's just, it's like the energy's just bouncing off the shield. It's not even touching her at the moment.
Absorbing all these people that are telling her that money's bad or it's not safe to receive or whatever. That's the point here, is for her to not receive all this negativity around receiving. The irony, right?
Yeah.
The irony. Now, all I want you to do is, if you ever have trouble summoning a feeling, an emotion, a feeling that you need, always you can default to gratitude and love. Those are the highest, and we've all felt that. So we get to supercharge safety with that. So for you, but maybe because you have a daughter, I'm sure that you know that unconditional love. It is like the highest vibrational thing that you could ever experience. I want you to infuse that shield with that love and notice the color that it changes.
Mm-hmm.
Notice how safety now feels in your body being tied to that unconditional love. We kind of went in the back door a little bit. We kind of said, oh, you don't know how to feel completely safe. That's okay. We're gonna throw something else in here to help anchor it in.
Back doors are good.
Yeah. What color now? I'm just curious with colors. Colors are important when we do this work.
It was a red and it shifted to a kind of like a pastel-y pink.
Good. And this is just like sprinkle on the top, but I'm really curious how much I can move in this short amount of time. I like to push myself to see. If you take that pastel-y pink and you take it and it's like a paintbrush and you color your timeline from that point to present with that color, can you like fly up and like above your timeline, like a movie, and do that and paint it? Because that will tell your brain from that point on, you have protection and safety and love.
I can actually give the shield to each different aspect along the timeline.
Good to notice. And now I want you to think of that feeling of receiving and notice how it's changed. It was gray and heavy. Now what is it? Just notice what's changed.
There's a part of my brain that doesn't want to. It doesn't want to go, no, I don't want to look.
Right? It's safety. And if I had longer, I could do it. I could do more. But your brain, and that's when you say, hey, brain, cute little brain, I hear you. I know you're worried about my safety,
yes.
but I've got it. Yes. I've got it. You know, because it's just fighting to stay, because it's like you're gonna die if you don't. But you know that that's not true. Like, you know, like, yes, we have to pay our bills, but somebody will feed you. Like, you are not going to die. We're in the Western world. Like, somebody will feed you. You're not going to die. You know, we're not, you know, in a third world country. And so really softening that and telling your brain from a mothering standpoint, it's okay. It's okay. Because then feel the spaciousness. Now, what can you do with that? That's when really like magical things drop in. You might get a really magical like idea about how to bring in more money or receive, or I don't know, like just from this place, there's more space for you to receive, because all that negativity, like if you're a cup and we only have so much capacity and all of that negative feeling was weighing you down in there, well, there's nothing left to put in the good. But now we've got out some of that bad. So now there's some pink pastel in there, right? So now you have more space for the good. And now if I hand you $100,000, what happens?
Goes into my bank account.
But the same sensation isn't overwhelming. It might still be present because we did a very short like version of this, but it's not overwhelming, right? So I just want to show you that we can create new neural pathways. We can change these feelings. We can change how we feel about receiving money. So take that color with you. It will serve you. And you go through and you revise all the memories and you give them the pink color, and things will start to change for you. And so from this place, what's the next step? I always like to ground it in with action. And I don't know, it might be an actual step, or it might just be, you know, give my daughter a hug. I don't know, but whatever it is for you, you know what's right for you.
For me, it's actually just to keep focusing on that replacing energy and to focus on that shift. Because if I go out and I do something, if I go out and I take an action, then my brain just goes back to its old pattern. So for me to anchor it in, I have to keep focusing on that process and just check in every now and then and make sure, is that still there? Okay, yep, great. Is that still there? Yep, okay. Is that there? No, that's changed. Okay, I need to redo that.
Yeah, and what I would do, this is probably going to be very helpful for you. Sorry, I know that we had an hour and a half. I'm so sorry. I'm really not feeling well. I apologize about that.
Why? We can hop off. You should have said you were done. You were toasted.
This gives me energy. Doing this work gives me energy. I love it.
I get that.
I just wanted you to know, because I kept saying, oh, be mindful of the time, but I realized that we had an hour and a half. But what might be really good for you that I would recommend is, we call it future pacing, where you envision your future self of where they used to be triggered or where they used to have a hard time like receiving, and going and giving that shield to her in that pink color. So this is really important. That pink color is super important because that is attached to the feeling. It only matters about the feeling. Because from this place, we can create new thoughts. We can create new realities. Just make sure it's the feeling. And if you're struggling with it, that's where something like tapping comes in, that we're tapping out the negative, right? Like, so if I feel negative around money, or I feel negative around receiving a compliment or whatever, I tap that feeling, the sensation out of my body, and then I bring in that pink color. So for you, if you could just do that, if you did that for 1 week, you would be a new human next week. Because the more you do it, the faster it happens. The more you're like, oh, I can just shift this, and I can shift that, and I can shift this memory. Okay, cool. You know, and just be very mindful of when your conscious brain freaks out, and just call it what it is. My cute little brain is freaking out, and it's okay. And it'll calm down. It will. You get to be in control of your brain instead of your brain controlling you. Because trust me, I came from extreme anxiety and panic. I know what that feels like, and it is miserable. And I had to get, I actually, full transparency, you know, I am trauma trained. I do a lot of healing work. Now it's more money work, and I don't go this deep with everybody. If anybody's watching the replay, I don't go this deep with everybody unless, you know, you need it. But imagine how your life would change if we change this relationship and this healing with money. But the point to that is, sorry, what was I saying? I can definitely tell my brain is not where it should be. I was going somewhere with that.
I don't know where you were going with it, because I'm not in your brain. But it was going deep and doing the healing.
But I want you to know and give yourself permission that you don't have to be healing focused anymore if you don't want to be. Because a lot of times we get caught in this healing cycle, and it's exhausting, and we're always having to check in, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this again. And so I like to gamify things. I'll be like, how much can I just receive this week and not have to like check in with myself? Like, yes, okay, 3 minutes in the morning I do some tapping, but that's it. Just to gamify it. Oh, that's what I was saying, that you get to be the owner of your brain instead of vice versa. The transparency there being, I did have to take medication for a short amount of time because my nervous system was so shot. I'm not a huge proponent. I'm not a proponent of medication, but I like, it's like when we take medication that helps calm your amygdala, which is what causes that panic, that fight or flight, your body feels safe enough to actually do this change work. And I think doing this change work along with medication is super powerful. I think the problem with the Western model is that it's just medication. We're not actually doing the work. And there's some people just doing this work and it's not working long-term because their nervous system is just too out of whack for it to stick. Right. So I took medication. It was very helpful, but I am not going to tell people that they have to. But I'm just saying for me, it allowed myself to feel safe in my body enough to do the work for me to be like, oh, I am safe to do this work. I am safe to let go of these survival mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
So just my story and what worked for me. I would never project that on other people.
Yeah, I know some people that have successfully done the same thing. They've taken the medication to calm down their nervous system so then they could do the work. Yeah, it's interesting. I wouldn't. I'm all for going through the shitstorm and going, nah, my body's just gonna have to figure it out. But I do believe that for some people it is really helpful because it's hard. It's hard. This is hard. Having a fried nervous system and trying to do your shadow work when you've gone through really intense trauma. And if you've been doing it for years and years and years, it does become exhausting. I did get a break. I did get a break when I got pregnant and then my mum got sick and died. So that was my break. The universe or the divine or whatever it was out there said, okay, you need to stop now. So I stopped. Then I got pregnant and had my child, and then my mum got sick and died. And it's like, that was my time off. That was what I got to experience while I didn't have to do this work. Fantastic. And then on the other side of that, now I have to deal with the trauma from the birth, having been a single mum, my mum dying. And so now it's unraveling all of that as well. So it fries your nervous system.
I would really question the thought that, well, my nervous system has to figure it out or my body has to figure it out, because that then dictates how we parent, it dictates how we show up. Like it's a lot of things that flow out. And just so you know, we maybe don't have a very similar, but like my dad passed away when I was young. I have financial trauma from my dad and grandmother passing away. We didn't get into that today, but all that to say that I understand. And one thing that I'm a huge proponent of is ketamine therapy. It's not ongoing. You go to a clinician and they give you ketamine, and it's just a safety in your body that you've probably never experienced. You're not tripping or anything like that. And it allows you to process those emotions in a clinical setting, just because you're almost like, I don't know, that might be something, I don't know. But when I hear people say, I don't want to take medication, I just want to figure it out. And I'm like, well, if that's your path, that's your path. And I honor your path. But if there's a part of you that really wants it, I would look into that. It's really powerful to do something like ketamine therapy. I'm really into plant medicine for the right people. I'm not this person that's like, you need ayahuasca and you need ketamine. Like, no, for the right people, right? Yeah. But that might be something for anybody listening that says, I don't want to be on medication, but I have trauma and I've tried tapping, I've tried shadow work and it's helping, but I'm still not living. Like for me, it was affecting my life. Like there was a point when I went through my dark night of the soul that like, I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't care if I lived or died. Like if I didn't wake up, like the next day I'd be like, okay, like that's not healthy. Right. Like, and so that's when I bring up something like ketamine therapy, when I'm like, if you don't want to be on pharmaceuticals, but you really want to process what's happened to create this, go have 4 or 5 sessions in a clinical setting with ketamine. I mean, you can find people that do it off clinical setting if that doesn't resonate with you, but it is very helpful.
That's okay. So, I wouldn't go down that path either. I did a podcast with a lady a couple of weeks ago that was an expert in plant medicine. It was a fascinating conversation. It was really, it was an interesting chat. And because she does all the guided healing and she runs ceremonies for people. And it was fascinating, the stories that she shared. They were really amazing. I'm not against pharmaceuticals. Well, I am as against pharmaceuticals for myself as I am plant medicine. I'm not biased towards either of those two. I equally don't want either of them. But again, I think it's great for people. I love that there is this option out there.
Option, exactly.
There is the option out there for people that if they want to go down the medical path, awesome. Do it. It's fantastic. If you want to go down the plant medicine path, awesome, do it. The thing I don't like is the volume of judgment that is out there against both sides.
Right, both. And there's just so much judgment in the world. So much, you know what it is?
Yes.
More than judgment, it's just fear. And I tell everybody, I don't operate out of fear. Even like, I'm not going to get in a deep conversation about vaccines and whether I was pro or against or anything like that. But what I did say is I said, I'm not going to live out of fear, make a decision out of fear. And both sides were preaching fear. If you don't get the vaccine, you're going to get it, COVID and die. If you get the vaccine, you're going to get some weird thing and die. And I was like, I just choose not to either of that. I don't do fear. I don't do life from fear. And when we look at judgment, it's really that people are just afraid. There's a lot of fear in our culture. I mean, just look, turn on the TV for heaven's sakes. Like, that's why I live abroad. I live in a bubble. I don't own a TV. Like, yes, there are TVs like in my I'm in an Airbnb right now, but like, you know, I don't listen to the news. I'm in my bubble because that's what I needed for my healing and my nervous system. That's not everybody's path. That's fine. But there's a lot of fear in this world. And that turns into judgment and hate. It's all fear. And so when people, that's why I always share my story and I always give people options, but I always check in and I say, you know what's right for you. You know what your boundary is. You know what your truth is. You do what's right for you. I can share my experience. I can give you, you know, anecdotal evidence and this and that, but it gets to be your choice. And that alone, for people to just give them their power back and say, you're an able human. I trust your wisdom. That is a really empowering thing that we can do for people. Because you don't get that in the medical community, right? There's not a lot of, oh, you're is like, you know what's best for you, you know, like there's none of that. And I feel like we're really missing the mark with that in any sort of healing, that you do know what's best for you.
How amazing was that call? It definitely didn't go where I thought it was going to go. It was incredible. The shift. I hope you followed along with that exercise that Ferryn did with me. I hope that you followed along with the journey and found those parts inside of you that might be struggling with receiving money, that might be blocked in receiving money, those moments where you might not feel completely safe in life, and did the same thing. The shield worked really well for me. And it was fascinating because most of my calls I sit with my arms crossed. It's comfortable. Otherwise my hands are down here, and I mean they could be, but it's just comfortable. It's also, I'm coming into winter, it's a little bit cold. It just kind of, it makes sense in my brain. But now I'm looking at that going, yes, but does it make sense in your brain because you are blocking yourself from receiving the energy that's coming in through the screen from the other person? So that was really interesting. Because now I'm extremely conscious of the fact that I cross my arms, but it's very comfortable. So I really hope that you received something out of that conversation. I love that. I'm so looking forward to having another chat with her. We did talk just after the show ended about, we're going to get together and have another conversation about feminine and receiving money, specifically about money. I feel like we're going to have a few chats about money, because it isn't easy for females to receive money. There's a lot of programming, there's a lot of patterning, there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of trauma, and there's also a lot of generational stuff, because it's only been recently, within the last, 60, 70 years, that women have actually been allowed to earn money. There was a time where women weren't allowed to earn money. They weren't allowed to vote. They weren't allowed out of the house. They had to be the mother at home with their kids. And that is still around. There are people still alive today that were in that mindset, that were part of that community. So I think it'd be really interesting to unpack that story. I will definitely be letting you know when that one comes up. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel so you can find out when that show comes up. And also check out the description, because all the links are going to be in there for Ferryn and her website and her work. Make sure you go and check her out. And also remember to go to my website, lovecreatesfreedom.com. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, you are greatly and truly appreciated.